Supreme Court heard a clutch of petitions which challenged the hijab ban in Karnataka. While patriarchs and radical outfits have said that hijab is intrinsic to Islam, here's a strong message coming in from the Muslim women in Iran. They've hit the streets now against a diktat which makes hijab mandatory for all women. The protests were in response to the murder of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini by the hijab police for flouting the dress code. Now, Muslim women in Iran are now marching on the streets, removing and burning their hijabs. They insist that hijab is not mandatory in Islam and cannot be forced on women. As Muslim women rise in Iran against the patriarchs, will those backing hijab in India take a leaf from their book? Let's show you how the regressive Iranian government has been forced on the back foot over the brutality of the hijab police by the uprising of Muslim women. All right, for more on this, let's take this across to our guests who are with us. Farah Faiz, advocate in the Supreme Court, is with us. We also have with us Shalini Ali, national convener of the women's wing of the Muslim Rashtriya Manch, who's with us at the moment. Let me begin with you first, Shalini Ali. The debate that's taking place, or the protests that are taking place in Iran, the question that many are asking is, can it really be compared to the situation here in India? Because what's being heard by the court is about a limited space. That is, of course, the hijab being a part of the uniform and the order of one particular state government that is now being challenged in the court. At the end of the day, we are a democracy, and unlike Iran, which is a theocratic state where these diktats are enforced, is there a comparison to be made here is a question that many are asking. How do you respond to that, Shalini Ali?
See, you cannot make any comparison. There is no comparison between Iran and India. In India, it's a democratic state. Iran is an Islamic state. Over there, they have different rules, keeping in mind Islam and the teachings of the Quran. In India, everyone has the ability, they can follow any religion, they can follow it secularly. Yes, the issue that was brought about regarding the hijab in India, it was regarding hijab being worn by girls in educational institutions. Over there, we had taken a stand, Muslim Rashtriya Manch had taken a stand stating that we have to follow the law of the land, which is even stated at the Quran. We cannot go against the law of the land. When you are putting your children in any educational institution, whether it is a school or a college, you already know what kind of a dress code you have to follow. So the question of hijab in the educational institutions in India cannot be compared to the hijab situation that is in Iran. I would like to bring about the thought that before Iran was announced as an Islamic state in 1979, it was an open country. At that time also women were safe, and even today women are safe in Iran. The concept of hijab in Iran has not only brought about a feeling of fear amongst the women of Iran,
right,
kept away from the world, from being kept away, stating their situation or their mind. They cannot speak their mind over there. The situation of hijab is being compared to that. I would also like to say, along with that, that there are certain different types of medical situations.
I'm going to come to that. I'm going to come to several of those points that you've made. Let me bring in some other panelists as well, please. Farah Faiz is also with us, advocate of the Supreme Court. Farah Faiz, now many would look at what is happening in India, which, as we all know and we've all discussed also thus far, is of course a democracy. It's perhaps unlike Iran. In that sense, there is a question of choice that comes in. But what many are objecting to is the kind of arguments that have been put forward during the course of the hearings, because at least one of the lawyers has been heard saying that the state or the courts have no right to interfere or even interpret what constitutes an essential practice in a religion, because that then raises a very serious question of what we have the courts for. If we have to at the end of the day bring in reform, there has to be review that has to be undertaken either judicially or through some kind of activist process. Can any one religion come out and say that nothing can be looked into or the courts cannot look into it? And is that a fair argument at all to make? Farah Faiz. I think we lost that line there with Farah Faiz. Let me try and put that question across to Ahmed Ayaz. Ahmed Ayaz, if you can hear me, the question that is being asked over here is that when it comes to issues such as hijab, when you see the lawyers of one side come out and say that the courts cannot interpret what is an essential practice, then that raises some very serious questions. Because if there has to be some kind of reform, or there has to be some kind of moving forward as far as what could be construed as regressive practices are concerned, if not the courts, then who else can adjudicate on this? Ahmed Ayaz.
Absolutely. There is a Muslim personal law which governs the which governs Islam basically. So Muslims basically. So in case of Iran, if there is a Sharia law, of course it will apply in the countries where there is a Sharia law. In case of Iran, there is a Sharia law, and of course they have to go by the Sharia, and whether it's provided in the Islam that hijab has to be done, and well, it has to be done, and no court, particularly in that country where Islamic Sharia is applicable, no court can interfere, because this is all in Quran. So you can't debate Quran, you can't discuss, you can't amend, you can't do anything on that. Whatever is said in the Quran, that has to be applicable everywhere to every Muslim, particularly
so,
in a
but
country.
Can the court not determine whether it is essential or not in a religion? If it is not for the court to interpret it, who will interpret it, sir?
No, but there are religious scholars. There are religious scholars who will interpret it. I don't know whether there is a Sharia court or not there in Iran, but Islamic.
No, we are talking about India. We are talking about Supreme Court and what the case that is currently on in the courts. In the backdrop, of course, what's happening in Iran is there. But Shalini Ali, if not for the courts, are religious scholars tomorrow going to interpret and tell us what is actually constitutes in a religion? If not, then, I mean, what do we have courts for if not to adjudicate on such sensitive matters?
I agree with you. We have a court over here. We have the Supreme Court of India over here. And like I said, it's a democratic country. You have to abide by the law of the land. If the law of the land says that yes, in a certain kind of an educational institution, hijabs are not going to be allowed, you will have to follow by that. You cannot question the law of the land. You cannot question the Supreme Court, because Supreme Court is the highest pivotal in India. But whereas Iran is concerned, we cannot question in Iran, because in Iran it's an Islamic state. In 1979, when it was made into an Islamic state, they had their own rules, they had their own set rules. Yes, perhaps there is time has come where you can question now, where you can start thinking about an amendment, and everything has to be done in a very systematic manner. It's really very sad, the situation that has taken place in Iran in the past 3 weeks. I mean, it's been boiling. The women over there are ready for a new revolution over there. They are wanting a revolution, and we cannot deny them of that. But we are no one to make or mark a question mark on what is happening over there, or how is the government going to take place? How are they going to question? How are they going to ask the women to follow? We cannot. We can only speak about the situation in India today. In India, yes, we have the Supreme Court. We have to abide by it. Students, parents, everyone knows which school they are going to, what is the situation there, what's the uniform code over there, whether they have to wear a uniform or not. You cannot bring up these questions later on after you've admitted your child in a school. Right. I mean, there are a lot of schools in Delhi which do not allow the hijab, and there are Muslim girls who are going and studying there. They come back, they don the hijab, they go for their tuitions. Are they not safe enough? And that's the same situation that is happening all over India. I mean, it's only a particular sect of troublemakers who brought about this issue and blew it out of proportion and made hijab an issue. Even at that time, I used to question, what about education? What about Iqra? What about Hubbal Watani Nisful Iman? What about these things? Why are you making an issue out of the hijab? There is no issue regarding the hijab.
To the extent,
quick
to the extent that, well, in India, there is no Sharia code, there is no Sharia applicable, well, things can be different. But in the countries like Iran, where there is a Sharia code, Sharia applicable, then the law will apply there itself. So here it may be a different thing. It is to the individual, it's applicable to the individual. But here the Supreme Court, yes, can interfere, because it is Sharia is not applicable in the country. But in the case of Iran, it is there, and they will have to deal it in terms of the Islam and Sharia court, and accordingly they will decide there. But here it can be different. That I do agree to that extent. We do agree.
Well, to that extent, yes, and because the courts have in the past, in fact, adjudicated on several aspects relating to religion, we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Shalini Ali as well as Ahmed Ayaz, I'd like to thank both of you for joining us this evening. For the moment, we're slipping into a very quick break.